Millionaire invited the black maid's daughter to play chess as a joke. But he had no idea who she was. At the Whitmore estate, where gold chandeliers sparkled and violinists played by the pool, no one paid attention to the help, especially not their children. But on one particular Sunday, millionaire Charles Whitmore, bored and boastful, invited his maid's shy daughter to play a game of chess during brunch. Everyone laughed, assuming it was a joke, a rich man's gesture. But 20 minutes later, the room had gone silent. Because the girl across from him wasn't just moving pawns, she was moving history. And by the time Charles looked into her eyes, he realized he wasn't playing a game. He was facing a legacy. Charles Whitmore was the kind of man who measured success in stock options and square footage. At 58, he had built his empire from scratch, rising from a modest shipping family in Boston to become one of America's top real estate moguls. His mansion, nestled on 10 pristine acres in upstate New York, was his crown jewel. On weekends, the estate transformed into a hub of luxury, where politicians rubbed elbows with CEOs and martinis flowed like water. To Charles, everything was a performance, even kindness. "Let the help enjoy the leftovers," he'd smirk. "I'm a generous man." One such Sunday, during a brunch gathering with donors and business elites, Charles noticed a young girl standing off to the side near the indoor garden. She was around 11 or 12, skin the color of rich mahogany, her hair tied into neat braids. She wore a faded yellow sundress, clearly handed down, and her eyes were fixed on the chessboard that sat untouched beside the fireplace. "Who's that?" Charles asked, gesturing toward the girl. His longtime housekeeper, Miss Laverne, looked over. "That's my daughter, Maya. School's closed today, so I brought her with me. She's quiet. Won't be any trouble." Charles nodded, swirling his bourbon. Moments later, bored with the small talk and looking for something to amuse himself, he clapped his hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, gesturing toward the chessboard, "I think it's time we test our minds. I challenge young Maya here to a friendly game." There was a ripple of laughter around the room. Some thought it was endearing, others thought it patronizing, but everyone assumed the same thing. The girl would blush, refuse, and everyone would move on. But Maya walked forward, quietly, and sat across from Charles without saying a word. "Do you know how to play?" he asked, still half laughing. Maya nodded. "My grandpa taught me." "Well, that makes two of us," Charles said. "He must have been a wise man." Maya gave a small smile. "He was a grandmaster." A few people chuckled. They thought it was a child's fantasy. But then the game began. Charles opened aggressively with a 4. Maya countered calmly with C5, the Sicilian defense. Charles raised an eyebrow. "Not bad." 10 minutes in, the room's noise dimmed. Conversations halted. Heads began turning toward the board. Maya's moves were deliberate, calculated, and fast. She wasn't reacting, she was anticipating. By move 25, Charles was sweating, not from heat, but confusion. He was cornered. She whispered, "Check." He leaned forward, studying the board. "You sure?" "Yes, sir." He moved his king. 2 moves later, it was over. "Checkmate," she said softly. The room went dead silent. Someone clapped. Then another. Then the room erupted. Charles laughed nervously. "Where did you learn that?" Maya stood. "Like I said, my grandfather. Before he passed, he said strategy is about seeing 10 moves ahead, not just on the board. In life, too." Miss Laverne stepped forward to collect her daughter, but Charles stopped her. "Wait," he said. He was still looking at the board. He wasn't seeing pawns. He was seeing himself, the assumptions he made, the lives he overlooked. "Your grandfather. What was his name?" "Thomas Bell." Charles nearly dropped his glass. "Thomas Bell. The Thomas Bell? The youngest African-American grandmaster in U.S. history." Maya nodded. "He taught me every weekend until he passed last year." Charles was stunned. He remembered watching Bell play in a televised match back in college. He turned to his guests. "You all just witnessed something incredible." Maya and her mother started to leave, but Charles called out again. Wait. Maya, would you consider coming back next Sunday? Maybe teach me a thing or two. Maya looked at her mother. Laverne gave a small nod. All right, Maya said, a soft smile spreading across her face. But only if you promise not to underestimate me again. Charles laughed genuinely this time. Deal. 5 years later, Maya Bell was standing in front of the US Chess Championship trophy, shaking hands with grandmasters twice her age. ESPN, CNN, and international media flooded the scene. One interview stuck out. Reporter. Who was your mentor? Maya. My grandfather. But the person who gave me my first real platform was Charles Whitmore. He saw something in me, even if by accident. Back at the estate, now turned into a youth mentorship foundation, Charles watched the broadcast with tears in his eyes. He wasn't crying for Maya's win. He was crying because she had changed the way he saw people and himself. If this story of justice, resilience, and transformation touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories about how small acts of courage can change entire systems, and how true reparation isn't just about punishing evil, but about building something better in its place.